So, Pat, when you take a look at the schedule, and Ohio State fans don't need to be reminded that it's not always the marquee matchups that trip up an Ohio State team. 2017, 2018, Iowa, Purdue, of course. Those teams still won the Big Ten championship, but they got tripped up unexpectedly by decent teams. So when you look at the 22 schedule, certainly a couple Western Division games jump out at me, but what do you see?
Well, first of all, in terms of those games that have tripped the Buckeyes up in the past, I think Ryan Day's done a really good job of avoiding that. You know, his 4 losses have come 2 in the college football playoff, and then obviously the 2 last year, but to 2 good teams. So not to say that that won't ever happen. Obviously, Urban Meyer was a really good coach as well, but I think they've done a good job of avoiding that strange trip up game. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. You mentioned some of the Western Division games. Wisconsin early in the year, the first Big Ten game. But I look down the schedule. I see you go at Michigan State, Iowa at home, and at Penn State and at Northwestern. Now, there is a bye week between Michigan State and Iowa, but that's going to be an interesting stretch for the Buckeyes because Michigan State is a team on the rise. You have to go there after a beat down that the Buckeyes put on them last year. The Spartans will certainly want to get some revenge there. Iowa is not expected to be any sort of pushover this year in the Big Ten. Now that game is in Columbus. The game at State College is not going to be the annual whiteout game, which could mean it's not even a night game, given kind of how the schedule looks. We haven't gotten a kick time for that, so maybe you catch a bit of a break there. But then at Northwestern, kind of after that stretch, if Northwestern is, every few years they have that team that makes a run. If that's one of these Northwestern teams, I mean, that game becomes increasingly difficult given you've gone 3 out of 4 weeks, given the off week, against some pretty tough competition. So that's the stretch that I really look at in the season to kind of determine what this Buckeye team is going to be. I think 1 loss is probably something Ohio State could manage, but with, as we talked about expectations earlier, and you mentioned people guaranteeing this team's going to go undefeated, that's what Ohio State is expected to do. And navigating that stretch of 4 games in 5 weeks, I think will be crucial for reaching that goal of an undefeated regular season and potentially making it back to the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, for those people that like to strategize, if there's going to be a loss, what is the quote unquote best loss to have? I think it's pretty obvious that it's Notre Dame. If you're just thinking technically from the standpoint of win all the games in the conference, win the Big Ten, lock that up, and obviously then it becomes more distant because it's the first game. And if Notre Dame goes on to another 11-1 type season, then it's not that huge of a deal unless it's 35-7. But as it goes through the schedule, if we get past that one, I got to think one of those Western Division games, again, it's not going to look good to lose to a Wisconsin or Iowa, but it's not a head-to-head against somebody you may need a win against at the top of the Eastern Division if there's going to be a loss.
Right. And you've seen in the past, you go back to when Ohio State won the national championship in 2014, that early loss to Virginia Tech. That wasn't even a good Virginia Tech team, ultimately, a team that dropped out of the top 25. But, if you're able to get better throughout the year, win the Big Ten, even if Notre Dame doesn't have a great season under Marcus Freeman in his first year, I think that loss, as you said, it's in the distance. If Ohio State looks the part the rest of the year, there should be opportunities to beat other ranked teams, Wisconsin, Penn State, Iowa, Michigan State, Michigan, all possible top 25 teams. So you'll certainly have the opportunity. I just think when you have a team like Ohio State coming into the year with the expectations, but still with some question marks, a good performance in that opening week or that whenever that opening kind of marquee game is can really set the tone. And that doesn't mean the Buckeyes don't lose another game along the way, but then you kind of have that ace card in your back pocket. We beat a Notre Dame team that likely will come into the horseshoe as a top 10 team. And, you have that card to play throughout the rest of the season. And then if you do trip up, say, at Michigan State, maybe that's not a terrible loss. You have the win against Notre Dame. You beat Wisconsin, you beat Iowa, you beat Penn State, you beat Michigan. Okay, then you still probably have a pretty good resume come the end of the year. Now, obviously, the goal, as I said, win the games. You don't have to worry about any of that. But, yeah, I think you're right. That early game can be the one that if you lose can be pushed off, but it can also kind of set you off on a run for the rest of the season.